Ashley at Ashley Brown and Juddson Potter. We are both automotive engineers, myself at Ford and Juddson at Nissan. So this project was within our industry. We are asking the question of how might long-range travel be a positive appeal of the EV ownership experience. We're going to take you through our initial user requirement analysis, our conceptual design, detailed design, evaluation, and conclusion of this project. So we landed on this question based off of both of us being familiar with road trips. Judson's kids play travel sports. I've driven to the East Coast a couple times this year to see my sister. And those are things that we really have to think about when we hop in the vehicle to go on the road, because that's the way that our highway infrastructure has been built in this country. But when we talk about adopting electric vehicles and making that transition, one of the big concerns is, oh, I can't take it on a road trip. And that's one of the things that is still holding people back. So we wanted to fully understand why that in particular is holding them back. And then how can it be an actual positive item? How could, going on a long trip with your EV be part of the reason why you purchased an EV? So we approached this project in such a way that we thought that this could be a product design or product service with respect to route optimization and where placement of chargers is, or perhaps an empirical study around how we change people's perspective once we understand why this is an inhibitor.
Okay, so can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. I'm gonna go through the user requirement analysis. So we started off with a lit review. We went through, of course, the peer-reviewed academic professional journal type articles, but we also went into the online publications that in the automotive industry, there's a lot written about cars, and there's a lot of competition. And so we wanted to just see from the industry what is the perception of EV vehicles and long-range driving associated with EV vehicles, of course. So quickly, the results kind of came through that, range anxiety is a real thing for the industry. So as far as EV mass adoption, which is, for good reason, for issues for emission and the environment. But as far as the market is concerned, there is a real problem. And so it was clear to us that we were kind of on the right track in looking at long-range driving EV vehicles and how we might be able to provide some kind of solution. So there's quite a few tools that are associated with EV vehicles or EVs in general that try to aid the user when they're driving and charging and planning a trip. This could be the in-vehicle infotainment. So the center display could have navigation to kind of show where chargers are. Some OEMs use an app to help with the situation, maybe for payment, maybe for understanding the vehicle's needs as far as charging. So in part of the benchmarking, so to speak, we wanted to go online as well and just kind of look at all the different EV OEMs and find out the comparisons, the pluses, minuses, who's actually trying to take care of this issue. That seems to be a big problem for the industry. It was clear that Tesla stood out. So Tesla has almost 70% of the market. That was a 2021 report. So it was clear Tesla was doing something about this that was better than other OEMs. Tesla gets a lot of press. I don't think it's any big secret what kind of strides Tesla has made within the industry and within the markets. But when you go in and you actually look at everything, it starts to emerge why Tesla is maybe ahead of other OEMs. So one of the ideas came from, some of the classes talk about ethnographic studies and also, the experiential data that can kind of come from one of the researchers actually going on a trip with a Tesla, so to speak, right? So that was an idea that kind of floated around and we kind of debated, would that kind of create maybe some kind of bias? However, we decided that the experience from everything that we were reading was important for us to really kind of dive in and understand users' perspective, customer requirements for long-range driving in an EV. So Nissan was, where I work, was kind enough to sponsor a drive with me and my family, and we went across to the New England area with a Tesla. And so I kept a diary, and of course the experience was quite memorable. Unfortunately, it wasn't a good experience. So Tesla does some things right. There's some easy navigation, route planning that kind of takes you to their supercharger network. However, the whole idea of range anxiety becomes very real. You basically have gaps within the United States where there's no chargers whatsoever, and you're showing up to a charger with maybe 10% charge left. And what would have happened had I broke down? What would have happened? There's a whole host. I mean, I could spend a half hour just talking about and listing the issues, but it kind of comes down to a couple of obvious things, like there's just not a lot of chargers out there. And so there is, when you're driving an ICE vehicle, there are gas stations everywhere. You don't ever worry that you're going to run out of gas. And the second big thing is range. So highway driving for EVs is a real problem. It really drains the battery. So you may see 250 miles on your the distance to empty as far as one of the gauges. You know, it's an important gauge within the vehicle to know, okay, when am I going to get to my next charger? It really goes down fast, and you find yourself looking for a charger every hour on a long drive. And even in a Tesla, that is just the performance. The range is beyond. It's a showstopper as far as a long drive is concerned. So once we had that data, right, from the online benchmarking and studying the literature and looking at this, and then, experiencing this ourselves, we wanted to create a survey and find out, how does everyone else feel about this? Is this a problem? Is this a perception from ICE owners? And it was clear that it was a concern. There were 49 participants for this survey. 9 were fully electric EV drivers. So quickly, there were other data points within the survey, but one thing became quite clear, and it was quite significant amongst the ICE drivers, which are on the left. And then even with EV drivers, although the limitation of this is that there were only 9, but there was a clear trend that long-range driving is an issue. So then we got into focus group interviews, and we wanted to, there's a qualitative side to the survey, and so we wanted to ask everyone, okay, so now that you've rated your experience with charging or your perception of maybe buying an EV, given the issues with long-range driving, why are these issues? Are there concerns that could be explained in detail? And find out more about the customers that were in the survey. So we posted all the concerns, and we tried to group them and tried to understand the customer more. And it was more of the same in terms of range and availability of chargers and time to charge. So a lot of times for charging an electric vehicle, it could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, maybe even more than that, depending on what kind of charger you have. So there's definitely concern as far as, the difference between, I'll just read one, the difference between a fast and slow gas pump is minutes. The difference between a slow and a fast charger is hours. So we started to develop some ideas in terms of what the problem is and how we might fix it. This is just kind of a list of some of the findings and themes that we kind of, at this point in the study, we felt clear that, here are all the problems. And then, we started to brainstorm some ideas on how to take care of those problems. Time to charge, the range, locations of chargers, different types of chargers, easy, hard to pay. Do I need an app for that? So why do I need an app? How can we make this easier for the customer, and how might we make long-range driving an actual appeal to customers?
So into our conceptual design, we had all of that information and notes coming out of the focus group interview and surveys, which led us into our own ideation and brainstorming. which we did rapid ideation of set a timer and come up with as many ideas in that time as you can, as well as a round robin build of going back and forth once we had each of those lists, and kind of a yes and worked really well for us because of the different combinations of items that could come out. And that's, we had all of our ideas we threw on a Jamboard, which we then separated into the concepts of, or I guess different kind of categories of charging, EV desire, telltale information, and range. We then took each of these sticky notes with these topics and then put those in an Excel spreadsheet, where we then also ranked whether that was a standalone idea or kind of that yes and that there were various combinations here that we could put together, whether it was something that was feasible in the now, near, or far, as well as ranking from low to high as a priority that we look into implementing as a part of our solution. So it was also at this point that we realized that there were a whole lot of different directions that we could still go with this, that depending on where your end destination was going to be, you were going to want different resources on the way there. Did this charge station or hub or whatever it is that we were about to propose, is it, end location dependent? Is it going to be regionally specific? That there is still just a whole lot more information that we would want to know specific to a location. And so we came up with, in this top right here, that there would be the scene, the requirements at that location, and then the solution and benefits specific to that story in itself, which we then threw on a Miro board. And that, and in the top right here, this is kind of all of those ideas, basically all of our sticky note combinations, the higher ranked and easier to implement kind of ideas. And as we were putting this board together, we realized that we are a lot better at describing what the situation could look like. With both of us being engineers, it wasn't something that we could necessarily visualize and do a sketch of, but we could put down the bullet points and tell you what we wanted that scenario to look like. So then we took that Miro board and eventually translated it into what we called our one-pagers, which are these kind of like comic strip board scenarios shown there at the bottom.
So then it was time to get into the detailed design. So one of the ways in which we felt we could effectively communicate and provide clarity for our idea, which started to emerge, one of the better ideas in terms of brainstorming this issue, we thought, was an EV hub. So with an EV hub, a family goes on a vacation, they run into some of the anxiety that can be felt on a long drive versus some of the joy that could happen if there was an obvious place to charge and there were things to do where you're charging, whether that's eating, some form of entertainment. In this particular storyboard, the family chose a movie to watch while they charged. So a lot of this had to do with where a charger is, what you do while you're charging, knowing that the charger is along your route and it's not something that you're looking for or that you're wondering about, and ultimately providing a solution to that anxiety. We want drivers to love and choose their EV for long drives. It should be a happy experience, a joy to drive the EV. We want our customers, or the industry obviously would want the customers to choose the EV and enjoy their trip. And so we were providing a scenario that we felt solved that issue. Part of the strategy was to, where to put chargers, both in our research and talking to customers and going on a drive. We felt that there is just a lot of opportunity to put chargers in locations where people already want to go. So whether that is a place of business where restaurants, retail, destinations, and then well, how would that happen? Like, how would suddenly an entire industry work to get it a proper infrastructure for this? And what would be the incentives? And clearly there is incentive for the industry, but there would have to be a very high level partnership to really deal with this issue and match this issue. We felt there were incentives not only for the industry, but for local businesses and then local governments where you're attracting customers. So you have a customer that's charging, they come into your place of business, or maybe a particular state has an attraction that they would love people to go to, like in Michigan. Pure Michigan ads talk about some of the beauty within the state. Well, let's put chargers along those routes, and so that if you're an EV customer, you're not worried about running out of charge.
So we took these storyboards into user interviews to get feedback on whether this was something that, that users would prefer on an EV long drive. We had 36 participants total across a couple of one-on-one interviews and focus group interviews, a good range of ages and a good mix of current EV drivers, EV considerers, and current ICE drivers. Different types of work from home and commuters, as well as adult only families, different uses of what people are using their vehicle for. And all of these user interviews took place via Zoom or Google Meet, where we were able to screen share these storyboards. The process for these user interviews was that we asked a couple of before questions around, is a long range or road trip travel an inhibitor to you adding an EV to your garage, as well as what is the longest distance you would feel comfortable driving an EV on a road trip. And at that point, we would share our storyboards. We had a scenario where it wasn't going to work out and they weren't going to hit their charger. Here's a scenario of they're in the vehicle planning on where to stop. They are able to see what is at that location, go through that plan. And then we would ask our users in the interview, now that you have seen a couple of scenarios, our proposed solution to a couple of those anxieties, knowing with confidence what you are going to show up to at a charging hub on a long drive, how did your opinion change? Is this the type of place that you would want to stop? We kind of used a good, better, best method of kind of what would be the baseline requirement of what you would require from a place that you stop. Why would you choose one place over another? What sort of amenities, what would that look like?
So up to this point, we felt pretty strongly about our solutions and ideas, and we thought we had identified the problem, and we were pretty accurate with that. We had some confidence, and we were pretty inspired by the storyboards and going through that process of really being effective in communicating our solution and actually showing the problem. However, in our group interviews, a lot of people had a lot to say, and it was just an overarching theme that kind of came right through. And that pretty much has to do with, so for example, we wanted to take, given that there were so many comments, we had to break this up into, initially there were groupings like requirements and concerns, but then we wanted to also look at the frequency and how many times did a customer talk or participant talk about range or availability or cost. And so given the amount of information and having to really kind of summarize this, there were some obvious top requirements that, so for example, range. Right now, range for an EV is anywhere from 2 to 250 for like a Tesla. Participants really needed 300 to 600 miles of range on a single charge, and they wanted that charge to be fast. They wanted the availability. They wanted the frequency of chargers. Put chargers everywhere was one comment. Cost. There was this price sensitivity about EVs and charging. Do I save money? I'm not interested in buying a vehicle that's going to be more inconvenient, that I can't take on a long drive anyway. So there was a level of most people felt that there were just not enough chargers in general. They wanted a smart vehicle to take care of everything if there are EV issues or there is issues with range. They just felt like the vehicle should take care of it. There were a lot of comments about education. Not a lot understood or known about EVs. And so sometimes you take it for granted when you get into the study and you think, oh, this is a problem, this is a problem. Oh, well, EVs do this, do that. If you work in the industry, you felt like, well, certainly people know a little bit, and people are largely unaware. If you're an ICE vehicle owner and driver, there's a lot about EVs that is just, it's not known. A lot of talk about convenience. But one of the things that kind of came through was this one-to-one that we labeled, where everybody said, I want a gas station experience. So if we said in our storyboard, hey, what if we were able to show you an attraction and a stop that you would enjoy actually charging at? They're like, I don't want that. I want to be able to stop, charge, and go. And it was over and over and over and over again. It was, actually, I don't want to stop at all. I would like to just get up north and not have to stop. And it was like, oh man, here we think we have this great solution that's going to, solve all these problems. And really, most people, a majority of our participants, really required the exact performance that they have in their ICE vehicle. That means they want chargers as prevalent as gas stations. They want their range as high as their current vehicle. So they want the cost to be cheaper, actually. And if there is an EV issue, I don't want to deal with it. So it just kind of kept going down that slippery slope, so to speak. And there was even like a moment in the study where we're like, oh no. But as we've learned in this entire program, this is about knowing the customer, and this is about understanding the customer and meeting the customer expectations and the requirements. Okay, here's what customers want, then this is what we actually have to give them. So there was a bit of a pivot after this in terms of what we would actually provide. Well, at this point, it would be a list of requirements to kind of to a previous slide where industry partners, this would include OEMs, charging companies, government, etc., where basically here's what's required if there's going to be an adoption for EVs, because people do go on long drives, people do up north. And so if you're blessed enough in this life to be able to handle or be able to afford a second vehicle, then most people said they would just take their ICE vehicle up north. And I say up north a lot, that's a little bit of a Michigan bias, but anybody who was out of state that we interviewed, they said, oh, I go home to my family and that is about a 6-hour drive and I would never take an EV. And even some of the EV drivers felt that I would never go to a remote area with my Tesla. And it's so, it was easy to pose the question. We're like, well, what if there was a charger everywhere? Well, yeah, then I'd feel more comfortable, but I need more range. And so availability and range became a big result, a big customer requirement. So in the end, some of the other issues and concerns and requirements that customers spoke to was, and one in particular that I want to speak to is they felt like, well, we want something universal. I don't want to have to worry about this charger versus this charger. If you think about it, you go to a gas station, you don't worry that the gas pump is going to fit in the vehicle. It fits in every single vehicle. And whether you go to a Shell or a BP, right now, if you go to a different charging company or use a different different EV, our charger's universal. So there was all this. Also, I want to speak to the new technology that is definitely being worked on in the industry. But customers' expectations are, hey, computers, phones, they're all getting better and better. I just expect this to get better. So it's almost like everybody is kind of waiting for this, but they just need it to really work just as well as their ICE vehicle. And this is just a brief list on some of those customer requirements. And in the end, finally, this is the EV driving experience needs to match the current condition for ICE vehicles on long drive. And it seemed like a level of, wow, we had all these great ideas on how to fix this problem, But in the end, this is more of a infrastructure issue than actually even a technology issue, because there were some Tesla drivers who said, well, actually I'm pretty happy with my range and it doesn't take that long to charge. There's just not as many chargers where I need to go when I go back to, say, Chicago to meet visit my family 3 times a year. And I put a little note here that, as far as, one little tidbit as far as, the mental model for charging EVs will really, in terms of filling up for an ICE vehicle, how many times has that been reinforced? And everybody understands how to fill up an ICE vehicle, and you do it so many times you take it for granted. So that what we would say is that EV charging experience needs to match it. You need to match the mental model of everybody, and think about how many drivers there are in the U.S. But I digress.
Additionally, a couple of limitations that we had in this project as well is that we have a lot greater access to non-EV drivers. And we know that EV driving anxiety and concerns are mitigated after ownership. So it's a question of, we would also want to understand more from current EV owners what their long drive experiences are and see what solution would work for them that, current ICE drivers are not going to see not having that experience. So there is also just a general EV education and awareness that we would want to include along with that gas station benchmark that Judd was speaking to, that we never really got past the point of I want that baseline experience, but there's also an open question around then how can an EV experience or an EV charge experience be better than a gas station experience, that we were benchmarking what we know, and there's an opportunity to be even better with ideas that we haven't considered yet. Another limitation that we had as a team is that Judd and I are both engineers, so coming up with some of the design and imagery around what we were trying to share was a little bit of a challenge for us. And then with respect to the project, there are still just a couple of different places that this could go and questions that we didn't quite answer around with a charge hub, who the operational owner would be. We didn't necessarily hear concerns or feedbacks from the people that we talked to around who they would trust to operate that. Again, seeing the government could be involved because it's infrastructure related. Tesla is doing this as an OEM, but we aren't seeing any other players enter that market. And then what sort of partners would also exist at this hub? And then again, just waiting on the technology to get there to meet it as well. We'd like to express thanks to Dr. Kim for being our advisor on this project, all of the HCDE faculty that have supported us, both of our respective companies, our friends and family, colleagues that are supporting us and have supported us by answering the surveys that we sent them. So thank you.
All right, thank you for your presentation. So let's get to the questions. Dr. Shambo or Dr. Beng Zhao, any question or comment or suggestions?
Maybe I can start, their phone can chime in later. Well, this is actually a very interesting study. Actually, is a currently a very popular topic that has been discussed both in the government level as well as the OEM level. So good topic selection. So maybe you have mentioned, right? Because this is very interesting. But my question is that maybe you have mentioned, but I missed it. So in your user needs data collection, what exactly the most important, or not just one, a set of important factors, basically in the user's decision making, how they're going to select those charging selections, right? So you talked about mapping the mental models with those charging station, maybe implementation or users. So my second question is, what mental model you're talking about? Because we know that different people have different perspectives, right? So can you elaborate on those two questions? Thank you.
Oh, sure, and I'll try and be brief. That Ashley can also jump in. So customers really, the two main issues are range. So right now, range is lower than an ICE vehicle for even the best EVs out there. There's some newer EVs that have certain claims, but range right now does not match what an ICE vehicle. So like 400 or 500 miles of range. However, beyond that, so let's say beyond the technology, currently what is the mental model for somebody? People do not worry about a gas station. So nobody's worried about, so some of the participants live in, say, a rural area up north, not worry about gas. So what we would want to see from the industry is how do we get to a point where an EV customer's never worried about charging? Because you're constantly worried on that drive. And when we talk to people, they're aware that, yes, I will have to worry about charging because I know there's not chargers everywhere. So, you know, some of this could be handled by customer education and industry awareness on EVs and, you know, why an EV is good. And, hey, we have EV chargers right here. But people easily recognize that every single exit on, say, some highway through Ohio that I was on, there is gas station, gas station, gas station, gas station, gas station. In the most rural areas of Ohio, there was a gas station. I was driving maybe an hour to my very next supercharger and we looked on the map, no superchargers in between here and there. So simply put, there needs to be, how many gas stations are there along that route? There needs to be at least that many chargers. And customer expectation is, wow, you can put a charger anywhere. You can put a charger at Starbucks. You can put a charger in the middle of nowhere. You can use alternative energy for that charger. So customer expectation is not only are you able to put chargers everywhere and they can be more prevalent in the gas stations, you have more flexibility, more options. You don't have to worry about a gas station. You can get creative with this. So most customers understood that there's not enough chargers and that actually you could get creative and actually leapfrog the gas station experience by ICE drivers. I don't know if that answered the question or not, but I'll let Ashley go next.
You did, but a follow-up question is basically because like when I think about my personal experience, right? So I think there is something missing from your consideration here, right? Like safety as well as the cost. So it seems those two important factors are not included. Do you know why?
Yeah, there were safety. So safety was not, there was not a big, so safety in terms of being stuck without any ability to mitigate the situation. So customers would talk about, hey, I can go and actually walk to a gas station, put it in a container and actually fill up, right? Or I can call AAA and somebody comes up, fills up. You know, like there's very little worry about running out of gas, a lot of worry about running out of range or running out of charge. So what do you do when you run out of charge? Does somebody come up and plug you in? Is there vehicle-to-vehicle charging? And there were some comments about safety, but it was more the comments of like availability. So there were 58 comments about availability, 8 comments that we grouped on safety. So in general, customers understand that, look, nobody's putting a charger somewhere where nobody's going, my vehicle is not going to catch on fire. People trusted OEMs. They trusted the industry. They just felt like, wow, look at that Tesla supercharger. Wow, that person just charged right up and left. That's awesome. I would like more of that. And so really, you know, Tesla's trying to address this. Their supercharger network is better than any of the other charging companies or any of the OEMs. But it's just far and few between from what most people do when they go on a long drive in terms of availability.
I would say safety for us was also wrapped up in a couple of other comments around the, you know, smart vehicle, knowing that your vehicle knows that it's going to reach the next charge station. You know that once you get there, the charger is going to work and that it's open. You're not going to be stranded at some, you know, sketchy gas station somewhere. That the idea that those were user concerns, but they showed up in other requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, we have question from gallery. Okay, so do you have a top 2 or 3 best EV charging apps you could recommend in terms of accuracy, ease of reservation, etc.?
So as far as apps, nobody wanted an app. there wasn't one comment where a customer, prospective customer, I should say, one participant, I should say, said that, oh yeah, I just need a really good app. Almost everybody wanted easy pay. So they want to plug in, not have to worry about looking at an app.
Okay.
We were shocked by that. There wasn't one person who said, oh yeah, this is cool. I got an app. It figures everything out for me. They're like, no, the vehicle needs to figure this out. And when I show up to the charger, I should just be able to plug in and maybe put in my credit card like I do at a gas station.
Okay. Dr. Feng Zhao, do you have any question or suggestions?
Yeah, I think more like a comment. I think I like your customer requirements analysis. One suggestion is you could potentially do prioritization in terms of saying trying to categorize different type of customer needs in this process. So which one the most important ones? So you can think of like Kano model or other, think of I don't know if you heard of like conjoint analysis, to provide a profile to see which one satisfy the customer needs the best. So usually a company like Tesla, they might provide like a vehicle, they always set the whole set or a whole configuration to you rather than say individual features to you. So in that way, you might get a better, so from manufacturer or OEM point of view, they will have to offer in terms of these different type of configuration as a vehicle or as an EV, they might be charging that could be associated with. And another thing, more like a comment in terms of, this is a very, very beginning, one of the professors was talking, saying, this could be just an operation research, it's just optimization question in terms of saying, where are you supposed to have a charging station, or what are the distance between those to minimize cost, but also to ease the range anxiety. So one thing you could potentially do, but of course there are so many factors involved. There's the government, there's infrastructure, there's these different OEMs, or whether you can standardize these different charging stations. So one thing they propose that, or maybe it's more like an optimal solution, is just to reuse the current gas station. So you can using battery swap. Whenever there's a gas station, you go there, you can directly just swap the battery that's already charged and you just swap it. So in that case, it will be just in terms of the time you needed to charge will be dramatically reduced, and you will always saying, or you recognize gas station, but at the same time, it's also these EV charging stations. But it's more like an ideal solution to this problem. And a lot of, I don't know if it can be realized in the future, but it could be just some type of solution. But also, I just sent a link in here. So in China, they're starting to do the battery swapping for EVs, and that could be something, some type of solution, or at least to some users to a certain extent.
Great. All right.
Yeah, that was a big, there was a big, one last thing as I'll say, and I'm very sorry, but like in terms, I totally agree. How do you prioritize all of the feedback that you get? Because we got a ton of qualitative feedback, and yes, we could do more, another survey, start to get some prioritization there, but definitely in terms of limitations and in terms of like the future studies and future work is how to prioritize that. But yeah, I agree with everything that's just said.
Okay.
It's a lot. It's a big problem that has to be solved at a high issue, high level.